Hey, Jonas Cheka here. It's time for our annual New Year's tradition. In this video, I'll be listing the top 10 books I've read last year, which I enjoyed the most. Not books released in 2021, just ones that I happened to read in 2021. I'll be giving a short description of each book, so you'll know if it's something you might be interested in reading yourself, and hopefully you'll find some new reading recommendations. The list and the links to all the books are in the description. Number 1, How to Philosophize with a Hammer and Sickle by Jonas Cheka. I'm just kidding. Karl Marx, A Life by Francis Wheen. This biography of Marx is probably the most fun and readable book I read last year. There are many biographies of Karl Marx, but I chose this one specifically because I wanted to familiarize myself with Marx the human being, more than, say, Marx the theorist or Marx the historical figure. It's written by a journalist rather than an academic, which is one of its main strengths. It's not theoretically dense, but it's rich in its portrayal of Marx's life and personality. It's sympathetic to Marx and brings out his endearing and admirable qualities while still acknowledging the parts of him that were obnoxious, arrogant, irresponsible, or even repulsive. It's in its portrayal of Marx the person that it really shines, which is exactly what I was looking for, and it was a welcome break from more theory-heavy Marxist reading. Number 2, Classical and Romantic German Aesthetics, edited by J.M. Bernstein. Last year, I became interested in German aesthetic philosophy, especially the Romantic period, and so I decided to pick this up. It's a collection of, as the name implies, classic and romantic German texts on aesthetics, some of which were translated to English for the first time for this collection. It involves writers like Schiller, Hölderlin, Schlegel, and Herder, figures that aren't as famous as some of their contemporaries like Kant, Hegel, Fichte, and Schelling, but still incredibly influential in the development of German thought and aesthetics. Just as valuable as the collection itself is the essay written by J.M. Bernstein to introduce it, which gives a summary and general overview of the aesthetic theory of this period, and really helps put things into context. What's special about the German aesthetics of this period is just how ambitious they were, often giving art a central and crucial part in philosophy and life as a whole. For many of these writers, art was not just one part of life among others, but that which unifies life, defines life, or helps us comprehend existence as such. Number 3, Lenin's Last Struggle by Moshe Lewis. It is very common to claim that Stalin was merely carrying out the legacy handed down to him by Lenin, that there's more continuity between the two than there is a break. It is against this idea that Moshe Lewin, a Soviet historian, wrote Lenin's Last Struggle, and the book counters the idea by looking into the last 2 years of Lenin's life, and showing how, even when bedridden due to sickness, Lenin was still highly engaged in party debates and was critical of the views and decisions of party members like Stalin. In this period, not only were there heated disagreements between Lenin and Stalin would sometimes even attempt to keep information about party proceedings hidden from Lenin. The book delves into a number of specific debates as points of disagreement: the new economic policy, the relationship between Russia and the other Soviet republics, the state monopoly on foreign trade, as well as Lenin's plans to reorganize the administrative apparatus, as he was desperately trying to prevent it from degenerating. Lewin argues that the most explicit part of Lenin's testament can be summed up in 3 points. First, combat nationalism, especially Russian nationalism, that great power chauvinism that the whole government machine tends to serve. 2, combat an ignorant, wasteful, and potentially oppressive bureaucracy at every level, including the party leadership. And 3, remove Stalin. The book by no means proves that all the central problems of the Soviet regime would have been fixed had Lenin only lived longer, and it doesn't try to prove this, but it does reveal Lenin as a dedicated and principled party member with a sincere interest in the victory of socialism, whose relationship to the rest of the party was by no means straightforward, and who, rather than just being a simple dictator, had to struggle to make his voice heard and taken seriously. Number 4. Reform or Revolution by Rosa Luxemburg. I would hope that Luxemburg, the great Marxist revolutionary, needs no introduction at this point. She is the queen. And this is possibly her most influential pamphlet, written against the views of Eduard Bernstein, who represented the moderate reformist wing of the German Social Democratic Party. As the party grew in parliamentary power, its moderate members increasingly abandoned the idea of revolution, instead arguing that socialism could be achieved through reforms carried out by already existing institutions. Where Bernstein saw the means of overcoming capitalist crisis, Luxemburg saw the means for the inevitable intensification of crisis. Although this pamphlet is more than 100 years old and written in a very specific political context, it's remarkable just how relevant it still is, as today's social democratic reformists make all the same central errors, and Luxemburg systematically tackles all of them, detailing why things like parliamentary reform, trade unions, and cooperatives cannot tackle the root of capitalist crisis, let alone establish socialism. As Luxemburg sees it, by rejecting the historical necessity of revolution, Bernstein has thereby abandoned all the central tenets of Marxism, and in consequence has regressed to a primitive utopian socialism. It's a powerful critique. Number 5. Nietzsche's Free Spirit Works, a Dialectical Reading, by Matthew Mayer. Nietzsche's works, because of their fragmentary character, are often viewed as just jumbled collections of aphorisms put forth in a relatively random order. And so it's really refreshing to see an interpretation of some of Nietzsche's works that sees in them an overarching narrative and progression, which develops from book to book, and where any given claim must be interpreted not as a decontextualized fragment, but rather in the context of its place in the larger narrative. The central problem that Mayer seeks to tackle is the fact that Nietzsche's career started out with The Birth of Tragedy, a book with aesthetics at its center, then moved in the middle period to more rationalistic positivist theory, which either ignored aesthetics altogether or downplayed its importance or even attacked it, only to finally reach the mature phase of his works, which once again returned to the centrality of aesthetics. Why is it that on this question, Nietzsche seemed to drastically change his mind, only to return again in the end? Mayer argues that this is because the works of the middle period and their transition into the mature period should be read as a dialectical narrative constituted by several books, which, by means of a kind of philosophical storytelling, reveals the inadequacy of an approach to life that does not center aesthetics. And Mayer brings this out quite convincingly. Although I definitely agree that these works have a dialectical narrative logic to them, Mayer's claim that this narrative was consciously pre-planned by Nietzsche in advance seems to me highly implausible, especially knowing Nietzsche and how he wrote. In any case, Mayer provides a good deal of textual evidence for the claims he makes, and provides a good example of how Nietzsche's works can be viewed as forming a coherent structure. Number 6. On the Aesthetic Education of Man by Friedrich Schiller. As already mentioned, I got into German aesthetics and German Romanticism last year, and this is undoubtedly one of the most influential, if not the most influential text in German Romantic aesthetics, written by Schiller as a series of letters to his patron. Schiller today is most remembered for his plays, most famously The Robbers, and the poem Ode to Joy, which was used in Beethoven's Ninth Symphony. But what a lot of people don't know is that he was also an influential philosopher, and this book was widely read, having influence on everyone from Hegel to Nietzsche to Marx. Aesthetic appreciation for Schiller is that which allows people to become well-rounded individuals. Our lives often contain divisions and splits that prevent it from being fully coherent or meaningful, but in art, such divisions become reconciled. For instance, the division between the spiritual and the material. In an artwork, the spiritual ideas that the artwork presents are embodied in the material that the artwork is made out of, or the division between subject and object. As in art, the subject embodies and affirms themselves through the object. Same holds for the division between the rational and the sensual, as art reconciles the two, presenting a rational content in a sensual form. Because of this unifying capacity, art is capable of reconciling conflicting aspects within an individual, and by extension, within society as a whole. Its importance, therefore, for Schiller, cannot be understated. Number 7. Narodnikai ir pirmieji marksistai Lietuvoje by toThus Merkys. This book, unfortunately, is only available in Lithuanian. Sorry if that's unfair, but what can you do? You could always learn Lithuanian so as to read it. The title of this book translates to Narodniks and the First Marxists in Lithuania. As it suggests, this is a history book on the beginnings of the modern revolutionary movement in the 19th century in Lithuania, a kind of origin story. Being Lithuanian myself, I wanted to learn more about the history of the socialist left in my home country, at least outside of official Soviet doctrine, and so I found this quite interesting. The Narodniks, for those of you who don't know, were a pre-Marxist revolutionary movement from Russia, characterized by opposition to the Tsar, anti-feudalism, and an emphasis on the peasantry as a revolutionary class. It tended to support bourgeois democratic reforms, as well as giving land to the peasants. It could be called a form of agrarian socialism. Given that Lithuania was still an agrarian peasant country without an industrial proletariat, and part of the Russian Empire, the spread of Narodnik ideas here was quite natural. As time went on, Narodnik views in Lithuania were slowly replaced by the new Marxist and social democratic ideas arriving from mainly Russia and Poland, and the first illegal copies of works by Marx and Engels began being shared around. In addition to peasants, the revolutionary groups tended to involve students and, to an increasing extent, artisans and their apprentices, locksmiths, carpenters, shoemakers, etc. It is only towards the very end of the 19th century that the movement very gradually made ties with the newly forming Lithuanian industrial proletariat. These revolutionary groups tended to be relatively small and easy to break up, not only because there was not yet an industrial proletariat to give them numbers, but also because socialist and revolutionary politics were illegal, and all such groups had to operate in secret, in a conspiratorial manner. The revolutionaries were often surveilled, their groups infiltrated, and whenever they were exposed, members tended to be either sent to jail or exiled, or in the case of students and teachers, kicked out of their schools and universities. Because of this, these circles, even the most influential ones, were almost entirely defeated through police arrests. Number 8. Nietzsche by Lou Salome. For those of you who don't know, Lou Salome was a Russian-born German intellectual who made significant contributions to Freudian psychoanalysis in its early stages. But she's also remembered as the intelligent, independent, and beautiful woman that Nietzsche had the most intense crush on, which, of course, in the end didn't work out and, for complicated reasons, led Nietzsche to an emotional breakdown. Here, writing after Nietzsche's death, she provides a reading of his philosophy and works. What makes her account special is her unique position of being a psychoanalyst who knew Nietzsche on a personal level. While they were still friends, Nietzsche himself once said that she understands him better than most people. Her reading is thus informed not only by his written works, but by what she knew of him as a person. And so it makes sense that her reading emphasizes the psychological aspect of his thought. In her view, Nietzsche, especially in his mature works, achieved a point where his inner life and the external presentation of his thought became completely identical. She sees his philosophy as a kind of internally generated struggle, in which Nietzsche creates his own psychological obstacles, which he then confronts as a way of overcoming himself, a kind of self-imposed challenge, and she argues that his final insanity was a more or less inevitable development of this struggle. Number 9. The Theory of the Four Movements by Charles Fourier. While I actually started reading this in 2020, it was only in the very beginning of 2021 that I fully finished it. In case you don't know, Charles Fourier is a French utopian socialist and the person that my profile picture depicts. In case you're unfamiliar with him, you should watch my video on Charles Fourier and cuck philosophy. Unsurprisingly, this is the most bizarre book I've ever read. The only thing that matches the sheer weirdness of Fourier's predictions is how confident he is while proclaiming them, without feeling the need to ground most of them in any kind of argument or even explanation. He repeatedly asserts that he will prove all of these assertions in later books, which of course never came. It almost reads like sci-fi sometimes, like Fourier is constructing a fantasy world of his own, which of course is fun in its own way. Among all the weirdness, however, the book contains some pioneering critiques of modern economic and political life, some interesting proposals for collective life, as well as critiques of gender roles in the bourgeois family. It is for these reasons that Fourier is held up as a significant early utopian socialist, even if he was strictly opposed to revolution, and instead advocated for a reformist program carried out by sympathetic monarchs. The worst parts of the book are, without a doubt, some of his bigoted and chauvinistic moments, in particular the stereotypes he holds against Jewish and Chinese people. In this aspect, he is disappointingly a man of his time. Finally, number 10, Edinburgh Guide to Thus Spoke Zarathustra by Douglas Burnham and Martin Jessinghausen. It's very common to recommend people Thus Spoke Zarathustra as their first Nietzsche book, which I've always found really strange because I find it to be one of Nietzsche's most inaccessible works. It's written in a cryptic biblical style and contains tons of esoteric symbolism and metaphors, many of which relate to his personal life. And so the first time I read it, I couldn't really get most of it. So if you're new to Nietzsche and you'd like to read Thus Spoke Zarathustra, reading it alongside this guide might be helpful, as it provides more context and theoretical explications for every single section of the book. That being said, interpreting Nietzsche is a job that is never finished, and this book by no means exhausts the meaning of Thus Spoke Zarathustra. There is biographical and historical context it inevitably leaves out, and not every Nietzsche scholar would agree with all of its interpretations, obviously. So take it as a helpful reading guide rather than the final truth. So, that's that. On the topic of books, my book on Marx and Nietzsche is out on Repeater Books in paperback, ebook, and audio form. Link in the description. More importantly, I'd like to thank my patrons. 404 Error official fan page, Abi, Alec Radford, Alex Gavriliou, Andrew Pierce Rolfe, Andre Oliva, Archive Transients, Bathild and Devahen, Bacchus, Biao Kent, Chewy Movie Reviews, Christian Pasco, Christopher, Clam Tears, Colin Paulai, Daniel Zotner, Don Nolis, Evie Rosk, Eric Owens, Evil Cloud,
Farmason,
Finite Mode, Gub Gub Kol Kol, Hayden Ellis, Hong Kong Aesthetics, Industrial Robot, Jessica, John Scott, Jonah Shi, John D. Pagani, Jones Indiana, Justin Armijo, Capsi, Carl New, Katy Perry is John Bennett Ramsey, Left Gallery, M. Lim, Mad Gold, Matthew Richards, Max Bendick, Nathan Draper, Nathaniel Lark, Paul Winfer, PJM, Polecat, Prophet Overlord, Rachel Ann, Rad Sheba, Radical Q, Slevin Olivares, Spiritfarer, Tendies123, The Name That Names Its Namelessness, Theodore Sandel Rolfson, This Money Was Made From Crypto, Tristan Stonehill, Victor Redko, Ver, Yavin Arba, Zim, as well as all of these wonderful patrons. If you become my patron, you'll get access to our Google Drive, which contains PDFs of most of these books mentioned, and more. You'll also gain access to video scripts and supplementary video notes I write, and also occasionally get to vote on polls regarding what the next video topic should be. I hope you've had a good first month of the year. I appreciate you, and I hope to see you again soon. Thank you.